We all appreciate our first responders. You know, I work right next door to Fire Station 13 here in San Marco, and these guys are always going out of their way to serve other people. Many times they're putting themselves at risk to do it. One of the things that they have to do from time to time is actually put themselves down inside tight spaces to rescue somebody out, maybe of a manhole or some utility spot. And they've got a special device that they use to do this. It's a tripod, and on this tripod they have a gurney that they lower down, and then they'll secure the person in the gurney and they'll raise them up out of danger. It reminds me of an encounter that Jesus had that you can find in Luke chapter 5, where Jesus actually was teaching. There was a big crowd all around him, gathered around this house. People were hanging out the windows, and the crowd was thick. It went way far back. And as they're gathering around listening to Jesus teach, there are these guys, these 4 guys who are trying to bring their friend who can't walk to Jesus because they've heard stories that Jesus could heal people. Jesus could make things right that were broken. So they're bringing their friend to Jesus, and as they're getting there, they're realizing there's no way they can get through this crowd to get to Jesus. So they do the best thing they can. They climb up on the roof over the house and they dig out a hole right above Jesus, and they lower their friend through this hole right at Jesus' feet. It's an incredible story, but through this whole time, what you come to realize is that this friend whom Jesus heals is healed because of the faithfulness of those 4 friends. They were willing to put themselves at risk. They were willing to go the extra mile. They were willing to take a chance in order that their friend could find his way to Jesus and ultimately be healed. What's really incredible about this story is that all the religious people gathered around the house to listen to Jesus, to evaluate Jesus, maybe even to find something in Jesus to criticize, were actually in the way. They put themselves in between the person who needed help and Jesus, and they wouldn't be moved. In fact, they were so much in the way that these 4 guys knew the only way to get our friend to Jesus is to go to the extraordinary measures of getting up on the roof and digging a hole down through the roof. When Jesus saw this guy down there, he looked at him and said, "Hey, because of their faith, your sins are forgiven." Well, this set the religious crowd insane. I mean, they were so angry. They said, "Who but God can forgive sins?" And Jesus' response to them was pretty incredible. He said, "Hey, you know what? Which is harder, to forgive somebody of their sins or to tell somebody to get up and walk? But so that you will know that I have this kind of authority." And he turned to the guy and he said, "Hey, you are healed." And the man got up and walked. Now, this raises all kinds of interesting questions for us when we consider. First of all, it brings to light the very fact that sometimes religion gets in the way of people who need to be touched and healed by Jesus. That even when we are doing our best just to listen and maybe to engage in religious activity, we're not always mindful of the people behind us who are trying to get to Jesus. And sometimes religious people can put themselves in the way. Maybe you're somebody who has gone through a difficult time in your life. Maybe you've gone through a divorce, or you've lost a child, or you've lost a job, and you would like to go to God, but maybe religious people are in the way. Maybe the stereotypes of churchgoers or other people you know who called themselves Christians, but they didn't act very much like Jesus. And what you found is that if you really think about it, what's keeping you from Jesus is religious people. I'd like to encourage you to take a page out of this story from the Gospel of Luke, to break through the religious crowd and go to extreme measures just to get to Jesus. Because what religious people will distract you from and detract you from, Jesus can provide for you and wants to provide for you. The other thing I think this reminds me is that if we've got friends who need Jesus, we need to be willing to go to extraordinary measures to get our friend to Jesus, even if that means going around the religious crowd to do it, taking a chance. It's always fascinated me how Jesus doesn't have any conversation with this man whom he heals. Instead, he says, it's their faith that has made you well. Now think about that for just a minute. We're taught growing up in church that it is our faith that leads us to a relationship with God. And that's absolutely true. But maybe what we don't think a lot about is how other people's faith also makes a difference in our lives and leads us to Jesus. I'm sure if you are somebody who says you're a Jesus follower, you can think back in your life to relationships and people you knew, and it was their faith that led you to Jesus. The question is, Are you willing to allow your faith to bring somebody else to Him? I'm not talking about being religious. I'm not talking about just getting them in church. I'm talking about bringing somebody to Jesus who can make them well. This requires something from us. It requires us to take a step of faith. It requires us to take action. It requires us to be committed. It requires us to love people who may be far away from Jesus and love them enough to bring them to Him and go to any length necessary to get them to Jesus' feet. You know, as I was talking to my friends here at Station 13, they were telling me that when they use this contraption to rescue somebody out of a manhole, it takes about 30 people to rescue one person. And that sometimes, in fact, when the rescuer is down there, that person can become overwhelmed with the gases and the methane that's down in the manhole. And sometimes the rescuer himself needs to be rescued. And it takes so many people to rescue one person. You know, that's what the church is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a hospital for the sick. It's supposed to be where we come together as a community and say, how can we circle around and reach out and touch and impact somebody with the good news of the gospel? This is why Jesus was such a tremendous friend of sinners, because He would go to any length to reach past the religious crowd to the people He knew needed a touch, needed their sins forgiven, needed to be healed. And you know, so as I stand here in front of this station, I am so grateful for the men and women that work as first responders, rescuing others. But I'm also reminded that we, who are a part of the church, are also called to be first responders as we go out into the world and lead people to the one who can heal them. Grace and peace be with you.